Have you ever considered that perhaps the place you were born, that house full of muffled screams, deafening silences, cold stares and absent hugs, wasn't a twist of fate? What if, no matter how difficult, it was a choice? Not some rational, conscious decision, but a soul's choice, a choice made by that deepest, invisible, and truest part of you. That part that understood that to awaken the strength within you, you needed to walk through fire. You had to be born where no one would see you. You had to shed blood in silence. This video isn't just another piece of motivational content telling you everything happens for a reason. It's an invitation from your soul for you to remember what you've always known deep down. Strong souls aren't born in flourishing gardens. They sprout from rubble. They blossom on concrete where life was never meant to be. Maybe you are one of those souls. Carl Jung said, "Where there is a scar, there is a mission." But what does that mean in practice? And why do so many spiritually sensitive, intuitive, and profound people seem to arrive on Earth in dysfunctional, emotionally cold, or even cruel families? Perhaps this question has haunted your sleepless nights. Maybe you've already asked yourself, why was my childhood like that? Why did my mother never see the real me? Why did my father only criticize? Why have I always felt like an outsider? Like I don't belong? Like I was born into the wrong family? These questions are painful because they carry the weight of the childhood you deserved, but never received. They hurt because for so long, you believed the problem was you, that something was wrong with you, that if you were calmer, quieter, more obedient, perhaps you would have received the love you needed. But what if I told you the problem was never you? What if I told you that you were born there precisely because your soul was older than the environment could handle? Old souls are unsettling. They are mirrors, reflecting the shadows of previous generations. And when a soul like yours is born into a wounded family, it becomes a battleground where the past tries to repeat itself, but also where it can be transformed for the first time. In a profound way, trauma is an initiation. It doesn't happen to destroy us, but to summon us. It draws us toward what we avoid. And it's there, in the fear, the pain, the alienation, that the seed of true awakening lies. It seems paradoxical, I know, because we were taught to run from pain, to toughen up, to move on as if nothing happened. But Jung viewed the soul as a living system striving for wholeness, and wholeness arises only when we confront the shadow. Think about how many times you've tried to move on, only to have the pain return cyclically. How many times have you caught yourself reacting like a wounded child, even though you're an adult? How many times have you repeated the same patterns in your relationships that you swore you'd leave in the past? This isn't failure. It's a call. The pain is asking you to see it, to hear it, to finally understand it, not as an enemy, but as a messenger. What if your family trauma is actually a map to liberating not just you, but your entire lineage? Ancient spiritual traditions understood this. In shamanism, the one who experiences chaos, crisis, madness, symbolic death, is called to be a healer, not because they know everything, but because they've been through it, because they descended into their own hell and returned with something invaluable: consciousness. In Egyptian mythology, the god Osiris is murdered, dismembered, and thrown into the water. But his consort, Isis, gathers his pieces and resurrects him. He doesn't return as he was. He returns as the king of the underworld, the master of transformation. Jung saw this myth as a psychological metaphor. A soul passing through fragmentation can recreate itself on a higher level. Now, look at your own story. Has there been fragmentation? Haven't there been moments when you felt dead inside, shattered, not knowing who you were? And yet, you're here, listening to these words, heart pounding, with tears that may not have fallen yet, but are about to. You survived. But is it enough to simply survive? A strong soul didn't come just to survive. It came to remember, to reclaim the pieces of itself that are stuck in childhood, to retell its story without the lies it was told, to look in the mirror and see itself, for the first time, not as a flawed human, but as a whole one. Of course, this doesn't happen by magic. The healing process consists of small awakenings. Sometimes it happens when you hear a song and cry for no apparent reason. Sometimes it happens when someone hugs you in a way no one ever has, or when you read a phrase, like this one, and something opens up inside. Maybe it's happening right now. You weren't born by mistake. You didn't end up in this family by chance. The universe doesn't make mistakes, and the soul doesn't waste an incarnation. What you faced was the ground where your strength began to forge, like coal that turns into a diamond under extreme pressure. But there's something you need to know. Trauma doesn't heal on its own. It needs awareness, love, presence, and above all, choice. You need to choose to look, choose not to run anymore, choose to open the box you've hidden inside yourself for years, maybe decades. It's with this choice that the miracle begins. Imagine for a moment that at the very beginning of your existence, your soul already knew. It knew it would be difficult. It knew you'd cry nights in silence, that you'd feel rejected, that you'd consider giving up. But even so, it chose to come. Why? Because it also knew about your strength, the same strength that brought you here, the same strength that, even after everything, still wants to love, still wants to trust, still wants to heal, still believes there's something more. You feel it, don't you? Know that this sensation isn't imagination, it's memory. It's your soul remembering who it is and what it came here to do. Why are strong souls born into toxic families? Because they are the ones who have the ability to break the cycles. They are the ones who see what no one wants to see, feel what no one wants to feel, and have the courage to say, enough. With me, this pattern ends. The pain ends here. You're not alone on this journey. Thousands of souls just like yours are awakening now, in silence, in tears, in courage. And this video is only the beginning, because what comes next is very deep. Are you ready to dive even deeper, to understand why, beyond even your knowledge, your soul chose this particular family, and what to do with that truth? In the next part, we'll enter this mystery together, and you won't remain the same. Have you ever noticed how pain, however quiet, always leaves traces? It shapes the contours of our voice, the pauses in our thoughts, how we look at others, and most importantly, how we look at ourselves. Sometimes, what separates us from the world isn't what we've experienced, but what we've been deprived of. The hugs we never received, the words that weren't spoken, the recognition that never came. And we continue to live as functional adults, but with wounded children hidden inside us. Children who are asking for help so subtly that we even forget they exist. At 30, 50, or even after 60 years old, you often look back and wonder, how did I get here? Not in a physical sense, but in an existential one. Why do I repeat the same patterns? Why do I still feel out of place, as if I don't have a space I can call my own? You've built a life, perhaps even a career, raised children, accumulated responsibilities, but deep down, something continues to resonate, an old emptiness, a silence that no external noise can fill. It's at this moment that many souls awaken, because life is patient and painfully reveals that what you experienced in the past didn't stay there. It continues to vibrate in the present, in your choices, in your relationships, in how you treat yourself. And if you don't stop to look, it all becomes a way of life, a quiet self-denial. Carl Jung said that what is unconscious becomes fate. That means everything you don't look at, everything you suppress, everything you hide, returns. It returns in the form of a symptom, in the form of fear, in the form of sabotage. It returns in the form of a tension between you and the people you love. In the form of a distance between what you feel and what you show. It returns in the form of an invisible burden you carry without noticing. Perhaps you know someone, or maybe it's you, who lives in constant alertness, as if something could collapse at any moment. Someone who never truly relaxes. Someone who, even when smiling, feels a deep sadness. Someone who, even surrounded by people, feels alone. This isn't a quirk. It's the body trying to protect itself from old traumas. It's the soul saying, there's something that still needs to be embraced. We usually think that childhood is in the past, but facts remain in the past. Emotions remain. Emotional memories become filters through which we view life. A compliment might sound like a threat. A request for affection might trigger a fear of rejection. A simple glance can take us back to an environment where love meant obligation. And the scariest part is, we don't even notice it. How many times have you suppressed your feelings to keep the peace? How many times have you pretended you weren't hurt, just to not appear weak? How many times have you silenced the truth that was burning inside, just to be accepted? I know these questions are painful, but they're also an invitation to look at yourself with different eyes, not judgmental but compassionate. Imagine a 50-something-year-old woman who has taken care of others all her life, her children, her husband, her grandchildren, her aging parents, always smiling, always ready to help. But when she's finally alone, she no longer knows who she is. She feels a deep emptiness, as if she lived for everyone but herself. Or a 40-something-year-old man, successful at work, respected by his colleagues, but who comes home and experiences an inexplicable longing. He knows something's wrong but can't name it. He only knows that life has lost its shine, that nothing excites him anymore. Stories like these aren't rare. They're common, so common that they become invisible. And that's why so many strong-spirited people live in silence, because they learned that showing their vulnerability is dangerous, that crying is weakness, that feeling too much is a flaw. But the truth is, it's precisely this sensitivity that can save you. Carl Jung said that the soul communicates through feeling. Pain isn't an enemy. Pain is a language. It's trying to tell you something about yourself, something you may have forgotten in the rush, the responsibilities, the masks. And this is one of the greatest spiritual ironies. The more you run from pain, the more strongly it pursues you. The more you try to be strong in the social sense, impassible, closed off, invulnerable, the weaker you feel inside, because true strength isn't the absence of pain, but the courage to walk through it. And it's in this place that awakening begins. Strong souls are born into toxic families not to repeat the pain, but to break it. Not to continue the cycles, but to interrupt them. But for that, you need courage. Courage to look back not with resentment, but with awareness. Courage to say, this happened, it hurt me, it shaped me, but it no longer defines me. It's not simple, especially when family ties still exist, when the wounds are still open, when the people who hurt you continue to deny your pain. But it's possible, and every step you take toward yourself is a victory. Every time you choose not to react the same way, not to repeat the same patterns, not to accept what doesn't align with your truth, you heal not only yourself, but all those who came before you. You no longer need to fight for love. You no longer need to change yourself to be accepted. You no longer need to carry the burden of saving anyone. Your task now is to find yourself, to return to yourself. And in this process, small daily practices can make a huge difference. Small gestures of reconnection with your soul, with your silence, with your feelings. It's in this space that I want to introduce you to something that has changed the lives of many people in our community. The ebook, Jung's LUD Method, 5 minutes a day for inner peace and clarity of mind. It's not a magic formula or empty promises. It's a compass, a delicate and profound guide inspired by Jung's teachings that will help you reconnect with the most important thing, yourself. These are simple but powerful practices that invite you every day to look inside yourself with greater presence, greater acceptance, and greater truth. If you feel it's time to start with something, this could be the first step. You'll find the link to access the ebook in the pinned comment of this video. And remember, it doesn't matter how much time has passed or how many times you've fallen. What matters is that you're still here, breathing, feeling, ready perhaps, for the first time, to come home, to yourself. There's a part of your story that you've perhaps never told anyone, not because there wasn't an opportunity, but because something inside you always prevented you from opening that door. Maybe it's an episode from childhood that seems insignificant to others, but which you've never been able to forget. That scornful look, that scream that silenced you, that emptiness hidden under a mask of normality. And you continued to live. You grew, but you grew crookedly, like a tree that, to survive, was forced to lean away from the light. Have you ever wondered how many decisions in your life were made from pain? How many times have you said yes when you meant no? How many places have you left just out of fear of being rejected again? How many times have you ruined relationships because love seemed too good to be true? Unhealed pain seeps into where we least expect it. It disguises itself as protection, caution, independence, but deep down, it's just a sophisticated form of survival. Yes, you survive, but you don't live. And what's worse, over time you start to think it's normal, that living with a heavy heart, with restless sleep, with a constant feeling of inadequacy, is just part of adult life. But what if I told you that it's not natural, that it's just a reflection of a trauma that's still alive in you, even after so many years? Carl Jung spoke of the concept of the divided soul. When we experience something very intense, especially in childhood, and we don't have the resources to cope with it, something inside us breaks, and this broken part continues to exist, frozen in time. While the world demands productivity, maturity, and self-control, this fragment remains there, waiting to be seen, accepted, rescued. Have you ever felt like you're acting like two different people? One strong, rational, even cheerful with others, and another, fragile, quiet, anxious, who only appears when you're alone. It's not madness. It's what Jung called dissociation, an unconscious mechanism that allows the soul not to give in completely, but there's a price to pay, and that price is your wholeness. That's why even having a seemingly stable life, you often feel that something's missing, that everything's okay, but nothing really is. It's like living with the constant feeling that there's a you inside you who hasn't yet been given the right to exist. Can you recognize this in yourself? If so, write the word trapped or broken in the comments, just so I know you're with me on this journey. You don't need to explain anything. Only those who feel it will understand. And here's an important point. Trauma doesn't disappear over time. It just changes its face. It turns into anxiety, perfectionism, a need to control everything. Or, on the contrary, into apathy, procrastination, a feeling that nothing matters. But behind all this hides an old pain that's asking for recognition. And also, trauma isn't just what happened. It's also what didn't happen. The hug you didn't receive, the recognition that never came, the conversation that never started, the love that was rejected and no one even noticed. These quiet no's leave the deepest mark, because no one but you saw them, and you learned to ignore them. Do you remember a similar scene? A moment that seemed insignificant to the whole world, but inside you became a turning point. If you want, share it in the comments. Perhaps you'll inspire another soul to find the courage to acknowledge what it's hiding. There's an even more complex challenge. When we grow up in an emotionally toxic environment, we internalize other people's voices. The constant criticism of your mother, the hidden contempt of your father, the comparisons, the silence, the sarcasm. Gradually, these voices become part of your consciousness, and you start to hurt yourself without realizing it. Every time you call yourself weak, stupid, incompetent, it's as if you're continuing this cycle, only now in your own voice. What if you could stop this? Imagine what an impact it would have on you to look at yourself with the eyes you've always sought in others. Imagine being able to accept your pain without needing the approval of others. It's possible, but it requires a bold step, recognizing that you're not what happened to you. You are what you do with what happened to you. Jung said that true transformation only happens when we turn to the unconscious and make it conscious. And this can't be done only through intellectual knowledge. You need to feel. You need to allow the pain to speak, to cry, to move. You need to descend like Orpheus into the underworld of the soul, but unlike him, not look back with despair, but with compassion. Many avoid this descent. They prefer to continue living in automatic mode, with the illusion of control, but the soul doesn't forget. And the more you run, the more the pain manifests in unexpected forms, like panic attacks, like insomnia, like unexplained illnesses, like fatigue that doesn't go away even after 8 hours of sleep. Perhaps you're feeling this now. Perhaps your soul is asking you, listen to me. And here's a truth that almost no one dares to say. Not everyone survives trauma. Not everyone returns from it whole. There are people who get lost forever, living on autopilot until the end. But you still feel. You're still searching. You're still listening to materials like this. That in itself is already a miracle. What will you do with this miracle? Looking inside yourself can be scary, but not looking is much worse, because you get lost. You detach from your essence. You become a character who smiles in photos and cries in the bathroom, who helps everyone but doesn't know how to ask for help, who lives full of obligations but empty inside. You deserve more. You deserve to recognize yourself, not as someone broken, but as someone who is recovering, as someone who is coming home, even if he is broken into pieces, as someone who understood that trauma was a chapter, not the whole book. There's one thing that few people know. The soul only heals in an atmosphere of truth, and the truth is sometimes painful. It hurts to admit that you still miss someone who hurt you. It hurts to admit that you're still waiting for an apology that may never come. It hurts to accept that, despite everything, you too have made mistakes. But it's in this pain that healing lies. Can you look truth in the eye? If so, write, "I choose to return to myself" in the comments. It will be a quiet statement, a symbol that you're ready to start again, from where you are, with what you have, with who you are now. What if I told you that sometimes all your soul needs is for you to stop running from it? What would happen if, instead of ignoring your pain, you listened to it with kindness? If, instead of trying to overcome, you started to integrate? If you stopped asking, "Why me?" and started asking, "Why did this bring me here?" Trauma isn't necessarily a sentence. It can be a portal, a disguised invitation, an initiation, and you're already going through it. Continue, even if you're scared, even if you're crying, because on the other side, something sacred awaits you. You whole, not perfect, but whole. Not invulnerable, but aware. Not anesthetized, but awakened. And this is true spiritual awakening. Imagine for a moment that you're walking through a labyrinth. The walls are mirrored, and each step reflects a different image of you. Some of them are familiar, others scare you. Some show you strong, others completely broken. You try to find a way out, but you realize there are no doors, only mirrors. And then, in a moment of silence, you understand. This labyrinth is not the world. It's your family, and each mirror reflects how you were seen or ignored by those who were supposed to protect you. It may seem exaggerated, but for many people who grew up in dysfunctional families, life is exactly like this. A home that was supposed to be a refuge becomes a battleground. A childhood that was supposed to be a cradle of belonging becomes the beginning of a deep sense of alienation. And the cruelest thing is that family pain becomes invisible, because the outside world doesn't see it. And when it doesn't see it, it doesn't acknowledge it. And when it doesn't acknowledge it, you begin to doubt your own pain. The ACIS, Adverse Childhood Experiences, study conducted in the United States showed that emotional traumas in childhood, even those considered minor, such as emotional deprivation or emotional unavailability of parents, significantly increase the risk of depression, addiction, heart disease, and even cancer in adult life. And you know what else these studies showed? The earlier the trauma occurs, the more likely it is to become the emotional background of a person's existence. However, you don't need statistics to understand this. It's enough to observe yourself. How many times have you caught yourself involuntarily repeating the same phrase that your parents said, even if as a child you hated hearing it? How many times have you remained silent to avoid conflict, even if it was tearing you apart inside? How many times have you felt guilty for being angry at your family, even when you knew your pain was justified? Family is the first mirror, and it's also where the first ghosts are born. There's a real story that illustrates this with brutal honesty. It's the story of a 62-year-old woman named Eliza. On the outside, an educated, kind lady engaged in volunteer work. Inside, a soul imprisoned in the prison of 7 years, when she heard from her own mother during dinner, "If I had known you would be like this, I would have had an abortion." These words echoed in her head for decades. Eliza never told anyone about it. She married a man just as cold, raised 2 children, trying to be the mother she never had. But the wound remained open. And only at 60 years old, after a sudden panic attack, did she realize she had never felt truly loved, not once. And now think about how many Elizas you know, how many are around you, smiling but bleeding inside. How many of them are looking at you right now, hoping you'll see them as no one has ever seen them? How many times have you been that person? The truth is, toxic families create a special type of survivor, those who learn to erase themselves to keep the peace, those who adapted so much to others that they no longer know who they really are, those who were praised for being too mature for their age, when in reality they were just trying not to get in the way, the child who became a parent's advisor, the teenager who carried the emotional burden of broken adults. These survivors are often the most sensitive, the most empathetic, the most spiritually awakened. And it's no coincidence. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, as a journey of confronting the shadow. And toxic families are often the main sources of this shadow, not because they're bad, but because they're unconscious, because they repeat, because they reproduce what they themselves have experienced, because they don't know how to act differently. But what about you? You're here. You're listening to these words. You're feeling. You're reflecting. This in itself already shows that something has broken the circle, even if it's small, even if it's quiet, even if no one in your family sees it. There's something in you that hasn't accepted the role you were given. Something in you says, this is unfair, and this injustice is the seed of awakening. Perhaps you feel guilty for having distanced yourself from some family members. Maybe you think you should forgive, understand, accept. But what if your distance was your salvation? What if this silence, this distance, this difficult decision was the only way to survive with some emotional dignity? This doesn't make you cold. It makes you human. It makes you conscious. It makes you the one who, standing before darkness, chose to preserve your light. Have you ever had to pretend everything was okay so you wouldn't be called ungrateful? Have you ever held back tears during Sunday dinner so you wouldn't spoil the mood? Have you ever blamed yourself for not missing those you're supposed to love? If so, write the word freedom in the comments. Sometimes all we need is to understand that we're not alone in this process, that there are others walking in the same direction, back to ourselves. What's most impressive is how childhood shapes us when we don't notice it. Did you know that a child's brain registers emotional experiences even before the development of speech? This means that traumas can remain in the body, in the breath, in the nervous system, even if you don't have conscious memories of what happened. That's why we often feel things we can't explain, and we consider these feelings exaggerations, drama, excessive sensitivity. But it's not like that. They're non-verbal memories that require healing. Therefore, healing is a non-rational process. You can understand everything about your childhood and still feel the emptiness in your chest, because this emptiness isn't conceptual, it's emotional, and it can only be filled with presence, love, truth. Many people get lost at this stage. They think that studying their traumas is enough, that knowing their patterns is already enough. But in practice, they continue to interact with the parents who abused them as if they were still 7 years old. They continue to seek approval where they'll never find it. They continue to explain themselves to those who have never listened to them. They continue to try to save those who hurt them. But there comes a moment when this becomes tiring. There comes a moment when you realize that your loyalty can't cost your mental health, that your empathy can't be a contract with suffering, that you have the right to say, I don't want to carry this burden on my shoulders anymore. And perhaps that moment is coming now. There's a little-known quote from Jung that reads, "Nothing has a stronger psychological impact on children than the unlived life of their parents." Think about it. How many times have you felt like you're paying for your mother's unfulfilled dreams or carrying the suppressed anger of your father? How many times have you realized that the problem wasn't you, but the emotional baggage that was placed on your shoulders from an early age? The soul feels, and it feels before it understands. It knows when something is wrong. It knows when it's being manipulated, even if the brain hasn't yet had time to realize it. And this is tiring. It's tiring to live in constant alertness. It's tiring not to be able to be who you are. It's tiring to maintain an appearance when inside you're dying. But in this fatigue, there's something sacred. It marks the end of one cycle. It announces the beginning of another. It forces you to stop, to look, to ask yourself, who am I without the pain of my family? Who am I when I'm not trying to be the perfect child? Who am I when I no longer need to be silent? And perhaps you don't yet have all the answers, but the very fact that you're asking the questions means that something is starting to change. True healing doesn't require you to reconcile with those who hurt you. It requires reconciliation with yourself, to recognize the child you were and tell him, you weren't wrong. They didn't know how to love you. This changes everything, because from that moment on you stop looking in others for what you lacked in the beginning. You stop repeating, you stop getting lost, and finally, you start to find yourself. And finding yourself is the beginning of all true transformation. Throughout your life, you may have become accustomed to living with the wrong answers, answers that others gave you, answers based on their limitations, their shadows, their traumas. You were told that you're too sensitive, that you dramatize, that you're ungrateful. You were told that you need to try harder, that you need to hold back your tears, that you need to grow up. And you believed it, because when a child hears something again and again from those who are supposed to love him, he doesn't doubt the truth, he doubts himself. The problem is that most of us grew up trying to heal in silence, trying to convince ourselves that things weren't so bad, that our parents did everything they could, that every family has problems. And on a certain level, this may be true, but there's a kind of pain that only those who have experienced it know. The pain of not being noticed, the pain of learning that to be loved, you need to disappear. And then you grew up, but that invisible child remained inside, making secret agreements with life to continue being accepted. You started building relationships, fearing rejection. You started working more than you can to prove that you're good enough. You started smiling when you wanted to scream, taking care of everyone but yourself, all to preserve a love, even if that love is conditional, toxic, or non-existent. But now is the time to break this chain. Everything we've talked about so far, about trauma, about the fragmentation of the soul, about the mirrors of the family, about the memories that the body stores, has brought us to a turning point. Either you continue to carry what doesn't belong to you, or you start writing a new story. And perhaps you're wondering, but how do I do this? How do I stop being this version of myself shaped by pain? The answer begins with a phrase you need to hear and absorb like a balm. You no longer have to identify with your wound. This is the first trap we need to break, because when pain becomes part of your identity, you start to defend it. You start to cling to it. You start to use it as an excuse not to change. I am this way because I had a difficult childhood. I can't build relationships because no one has ever truly loved me. I don't trust anyone because I've been betrayed. You understand? It's not about denying what happened. It's about not allowing what happened to continue defining who you are. You are more than your story. Your pain is part of the journey, but not the final destination. And when you start looking at it with awareness, with honesty, something changes. Because pain, when it's truly heard, begins to transform. Now the second trap, the opposite, is to disconnect from the pain so much that you stop feeling it. Many people who grew up in a toxic environment learn to live from the neck up. They think, analyze, plan, but don't feel. They stay in their mind, away from their body, because the body hurts. The body carries memories that the mind can't control. And that's why so many people live in tension, rigidity, anxiety, because they're constantly fighting their emotions. Have you ever noticed this in yourself? Have you ever caught yourself trying to rationalize a pain that deep down you just want to feel? Have you ever run from silence into noise? Have you ever filled your life with activities just to avoid facing what lives in the emptiness? This escape has a price. It keeps the wound alive, even if you don't see it. An unfelt wound is like an unread letter. It stays there, waiting, 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 and the more time passes, the louder it becomes. So what to do? What to do when you no longer want to identify with the pain, but you can't ignore it either? The answer is in integration. True healing is not forgetting. It's not forgiveness by force. It's not pretending that you weren't hurt. True healing begins when you can say, "This hurt me. It shaped me. But I choose not to live with it." You look at the past, not to lock yourself in it, but to free who you were. You allow yourself to feel, not to suffer again, but to get rid of the burden. It's like finding the child you were and saying, "Now I'll take care of you." Can you imagine this moment of inner reconciliation? When the adult you've become reaches out to that part of you that's frozen in the past? When you no longer expect your mother to understand, your father to apologize, the world to recognize you, because you recognize yourself, you accept yourself, you free yourself. Maybe now this sounds distant, maybe it sounds impossible, but it's not like that. In reality, the soul already knows the way. It's the ego that resists. And here comes a truth that can be unpleasant, but needs to be said. No one is coming to save you. Not one therapist, not one guru, not one YouTube video. Everything that reaches you, including these words, is just a reminder. Reminders of something you already know somewhere. Your soul remembers. Remembers that you're a whole person. Remembers that you're worthy. Remembers that inside you there's a place where the pain has never touched the world. And it's to this place that all this healing process is leading you. Now understand one thing. Breaking away from the pain doesn't mean breaking away from your story. It simply means that you'll no longer use your pain as part of your identity. You'll no longer walk into a room expecting to be rejected. You'll no longer accept relationships that cause you pain just to avoid being alone. You'll no longer shrink to fit someone else's frame. This is a revolution. And a revolution, in this case, is silence. It's a choice. It's starting to respond with love, where before there was only reaction. It's starting to understand that sometimes the greatest strength is not participating in the game of pain that shaped you. Carl Jung said, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." And perhaps now you're ready to accept, not in the sense of resigning yourself, but in the sense of opening up to life, of not suffering anymore. The soul doesn't want perfection. It wants truth, and your truth may be imperfect, may be messy, may still be in the process of becoming, but it's yours, and in it lives your freedom. If you've come to this point, it's no coincidence. And if something inside you is vibrating right now, if some part of you has felt warmth in your chest, a tear in your eye, an unusual silence, listen to it. It's your heart telling you now is the time. Time to live without armor. Time to return to yourself. Time to say, "I'm not who they made me. I'm who I choose to be." And if you want to learn how to put all this into practice with clear, humane, and deeply transforming steps, then take a deep breath and prepare for what comes next, because that's exactly what we'll be exploring together in Part 6, an intimate, direct, and realistic guide to transforming pain into direction, trauma into wisdom, and shadow into strength. There comes a moment in life when we stop, not because of physical fatigue, but because of a deeper fatigue, the fatigue of the soul, the fatigue of shouldering someone else's burden, of trying to fix relationships that never existed, of hiding ourselves to fit into the world. And when this moment comes, you have two choices: continue living on autopilot, or take a step, real, conscious, and inward, towards yourself. If you've come to this place, it's that something in you has already chosen the second path, even if you're afraid, even if you don't know where to start.